I want to tell you the story of the man who taught me how to be a space analyst. And then he exploited me, and then he threatened me to the point where I had to block his phone number and email address. Hi, my name is Laura Forsick. I'm the executive director of space consulting firm Astrolytical, and this is my backstory as to how I learned how to be a space analyst and some of the things that I learned from that experience that I applied to my own space consulting company, the positive and the negative. Number one lesson learned: pay your employees. So the way this company operated, and it was about a year old when I first joined it, is that it hired unpaid interns and really used their labor to run the basics of the company, the data collection, the analysis, and it was high turnover. When I joined the company, I joined as a junior space analyst intern, and 4 days later, I was promoted to be a junior space analyst, no longer an intern, and then a week and a half later, I was promoted to lead the analyst team. Other people were not seeing the worth with working for free. Now, I was a graduate student at the time, and I was used to working for free. It was almost ingrained in me to work for free, which has been to the detriment of my entire career, unfortunately. I really should not have agreed to work for free, and yet I wanted the experience because I was a scientist, I was not trained as an analyst, and I knew that was the direction that I wanted to go in, and so I was willing to work for free in order to get that experience. A whole 2 weeks into working for this company, I was leading the analyst team under the CEO. So he had other interns, which were undergraduate students mostly, and I was responsible not just for the analysis work, but for managing that team. When people work for free, they are less motivated, they are less dedicated, and they are less likely to stay, and worse, they're more likely to ghost you, which means leaving without even letting you know that they're leaving. And that means that there's a lot of work that's delegated to other people that does not get done because someone has left without even saying that they weren't going to complete that work. What I learned from this experience is that you should not use unpaid labor or use it very sparingly. One thing I'm very grateful for is that this CEO had a lot of training documents, and he had one-on-one calls with me to train me in business, which is not something I'd ever been trained in. I was a scientist. I had no business training. I had no business financial training. Through the training documents that he provided, through our one-on-one calls, and even listening in on some of the interviews that I did, he was able to give me some really good feedback and really train me in how to be an analyst, including how to analyze a space company with things like leadership. Who are the people involved? What kind of experience do they have? What kind of track record do they have? What kind of background do they have? Funding. How well funded is this company? Does it come from one funding source or a diversity of funding sources? Is it all MOUs and promises, or is it actual grants and venture capital funding? Progress. Is this company making progress on what it says it's going to do, or is it a paper project? Are they actually building hardware? If they're a hardware company, are they actually doing something that can prove that they're making progress, becoming operational and becoming profitable? Realism. How realistic are their plans? And this is a pet peeve of mine within the space sector, of unrealistic announcements and aspirations and all of that. How realistic is this company, especially if they say they're going to do some wild, amazing thing in X number of years that seems impossible, because it probably is. News. So things like rocket launch failures, or getting their first rocket to orbit, or other types of milestones depending on what kind of company that it is. And in fact, a lot of these basics are what I talk about in the video I'm going to link above about how to spot a BS space company. A lot of those foundational things that I talk about in that video, I learned from this space analyst company. Another lesson learned was to hire talent carefully. The business owner of this analysis company hired unpaid interns. Some of them had a little bit of space interest and knowledge, but most of them did not. It is really hard through on-the-job training to train somebody in everything they need to know about space, in addition to everything they need to know about analysis, in addition to everything they need to know about how the company runs and what the company procedures are. If you don't hire someone who has at least some basis in the expertise you're looking for, if you're only hiring for somebody who's willing to work for free, you're not going to get high quality data. You're not going to get high quality results. And things are going to take much longer. And if the unpaid interns are feeling discouraged, if they feel like it's taking too long, they feel like the learning curve is too high, then they are not going to be incentivized to stay and they're just going to leave or ghost. So with my own company, I am willing to hire people who do not have space experience, but do have an interest in space and therefore are already familiar at least a little bit with the space sector. I had mentioned that this space analyst CEO actually listened in on some of the interviews that I did with executives of space companies. And in fact, he's the one who encouraged me to reach out to any executive, any person in any space company, or even people at NASA or other related organizations, to reach out to them without fear, because the worst they're going to do is ignore me, or the worst they're going to say is no. But in a lot of cases, they will actually respond and give me the time of day to conduct an interview. And through his training, I was able to understand exactly how to conduct those interviews, what kind of language to use, to do my research ahead of time, to write a script of questions, to repeat any questions that they dodged, and actually understand if they're just not willing to tell me that question or if they skipped it by accident, and to thank them at the end. I really credit this space analyst CEO for giving me the confidence to reach out to anybody in the space sector and consider them a colleague, because at this point I was still in a bit of a transition where I was a graduate student, I was a more senior graduate student, but I still had that bit of a hierarchy in my head that I was some lowly graduate student and that I couldn't possibly talk to the CEO of wherever. But I could, because I needed to see myself as their colleague first. That gave me the freedom and confidence to reach out to anybody. Reputation matters. The CEO of the space analyst company went in a different direction after I stopped working with him. He was getting a reputation of being unreliable and unpredictable. And in fact, he embarrassed himself at a conference. He was the figurehead of the company. This is true for many companies. The CEO is often the person that people look to understand the values and the quality of the company. And so this CEO was ruining the reputation of his own company by his behavior. And so this is something I've been very aware of as I started my own company and as I continue to grow my company, is that I make sure that I maintain professionalism in all of the aspects of communication. Professionalism and reliability are two values that I want to make sure that my company really radiates, and therefore I must radiate it. I truly credit my experience working for this space analyst company as giving me the confidence to start my own space consulting firm 7.5 years ago. I knew that I could do it. I had the space analyst skills. I was absolutely 100% confident that I was a really good space analyst. Now, what I didn't have was the skills to run a business. That came through trial and error. I will link above the video where I talk about all the mistakes that I made when starting my own space consulting company. That small space analysis company, it was eventually sold to new leadership. My equity shares were worth a whopping $50 for over a year's worth of work. The company has resurrected itself under new leadership, and I haven't heard from that original CEO in 7 years, since he wanted a 5-minute phone call out of the blue where he scolded me for emailing him twice in 3 years and then threatened to sue me if I didn't remove his name from one of my old blog posts. And this is the last lesson imparted to me. It's okay to pivot away from certain people. Some people have a role to play earlier on in your career, earlier on in your business. Once they fulfill that role, it's okay to let them go. It's okay to move away from some of those people who had a larger influence earlier on. Sometimes we even outgrow certain people that we closely worked with in the past, and that is okay. If you are interested in starting your own space company or growing your space company or working in the space sector, please contact me. My company, Astrolytical, specializes in helping businesses, nonprofits, and government entities to grow in space. So reach out to us at astrolytical.com.